Okay, so we want to start talking about angles, and we have some vocabulary words that we need to first address. Some of these you may have heard, but not really have put together, and that's what we're going to do today. So first off is well, let's talk about an angle first. Let's go a little bit out of order. An angle would look almost like this. And so the way that the textbook describes it is that an angle is uh, well, the textbook goes through and says that an angle is formed by two non-collinear rays. Technically, these rays can be collinear. They can be on the same line. We would just have a straight angle. So I'm going to just say that we could have an angle being formed by two rays with a common endpoint or intersecting lines. So these are two rays, and here's their endpoint, and so this would be an angle. We can see that this angle is formed by those two rays. However, if I just have two lines as such, then there are four angles that are formed here, and that's okay. So really just look for an angle as some sort of an opening, almost like an incomplete triangle. We can make an incomplete triangle there or here. And that's what an angle is. You don't need to worry about what the exact definition is. I won't ask you for that. Just understand and be able to recognize what it is, what an angle is, to see a picture of an angle and say, ah, that's an angle. Then we also have a degree. We're just going to know that this is the measurement for an angle. There's a more specific reasoning and definition, but for us, we're not going to be concerning ourselves too much about that. So for example, I could have 45 degrees. And so that degree is the symbol. So you may even see that as a temperature, right? It's 80 degrees outside. It's 30 degrees outside. We use degrees in English as sort of a measurement of an interval. So you may have heard the expression, oh, yeah, I get that, to a certain degree. And so a degree is a part. So in a circle, we actually divide a circle into 360 parts, or 360 degrees. So a degree is just a fraction of that part. Now for a bisector, to bisect something, we could look at angle bisectors or segment bisectors. Either way, to bisect something means just to cut in half. So if I have an angle bisector, so there's my angle. An angle bisector would do this. It means that I cut these two angles, I cut this one angle into two equal angles. And so that is a bisected angle. Now, technically, a straight line could be seen as an angle. So if I draw a line straight up, or a ray straight up, I have cut this line into two equal parts. So that is now an angle bisector. And actually, I wrote that that was perpendicular. It doesn't need to be perpendicular. So there we go. This ray cuts these, actually, we can make that two segments, right? This ray cuts these two segments into two equal halves. It cuts it in half, meaning it bisects it. Now, in terms of an angle, I've been talking about angles, but not necessarily what this piece is. A vertex is where the angle opens up. There's really no better way to say it. So, where the angle opens up. And so we can see that this vertex would be right here for this first example of the angle. We're going to refer to that. So if I have this angle here, and let's give it some points. We'll say that this is A, B, and C. If my vertex is this in green, then I would say that this is angle BAC or angle CAB. The middle letter representing the point should be the vertex. It should be the end point for the angle. So we read it in order, so BAC or CAB. And that's very important because we could have multiple angles on top of each other, and if we label these appropriately, we'll be able to read them as such. And finally, we have opposite rays. So if I have a point, an endpoint, and I have a ray going this way, and a ray going in the opposite direction, what does that look like? Yeah, you'd be right if you said it's a straight line. Opposite rays are just rays with a common endpoint that go in opposite directions. So this is just really nothing more than a line with a point. And at that point, we have those two opposite rays. All right, now we have to draw an angle. And so this is a protractor. We're going to be using a protractor. So whenever we want to draw an angle, the first step we want to use is to draw a line. So we want to draw a straight line. So there we go. I drew my straight line. And we're going to use this protractor. So we're going to put this little crosshair right in the middle. We're going to put that at the very edge of our line and put this bottom line on the line that we drew. So I don't put the bottom of the protractor because you can see that there's this empty white space. What I actually want to do is I want to put this on the line that says 0 or 180 degrees. For this specific, every protractor is different. For this specific protractor, on the outside, we can see that we go in a clockwise fashion from 0 to 180. And on the inside, we go counterclockwise, so we go 180 to 0. On the inside, it's kind of difficult to see these middle units. They count by tens. So if we wanted to count something like 45 degrees, we might want to start over here. And so actually that's what I'm going to do. Let's say we want to graph 37 degrees. Well, I start counting at 0 and I go up to 37. Well, there's 30. This is 35, 36, 37. And I'm going to, it's not great. I'm going to make a little dot at 37. A little bit there. And then I'm just going to get rid of my protractor. Now I'm going to draw a straight line so that it goes through this point and connects there. This is now a 37-degree angle that I drew. To measure it, I would line this up and read what it says. Now this is just a little bit above that. My mark was not as accurate as it could have been, and that's okay. I don't know what this does. I'll just extend everything. And especially when you have thick lines, you're gonna be a little bit inaccurate. But as long as you're within a couple degrees, you should be fine. All right, we want to talk about what some types of angles are. So a right angle is 90 degrees. And so it's going to look just like this. We write a right angle with this sort of box. So typically we write an angle with an arc, but whenever you see this square, that means it's a right angle, it's 90 degrees. An obtuse angle is going to be like this. And so an obtuse angle is going to be greater than 90 degrees but less than 180 degrees. That's something different. We don't need to worry about that. But an obtuse angle is going to be greater than 90 degrees. And acute, you may have heard this before, because it's a tiny angle, it's acute. It is going to be less than 90 degrees. So we start off with an angle less than 90 degrees. It's an acute angle. Greater, or at 90 degrees, it's going to be a right angle. And then an obtuse angle is going to be greater than 90 degrees, technically less than 180. A congruent angle, that's going to be anything that's equal. So equal measurements. So we could say that angle CAB is congruent to angle DEF because 30 degrees is equal to 30 degrees. So this is the symbol for congruence. They are congruent. And this just shows that those two angles are congruent because their measurements are the same. And so those are the different types of angles. Here's how to draw an angle and some other vocabulary words. So just make sure you're familiar with these words. Again, you don't need to know the word-for-word definition, but just be familiar with the concept and understand what each one means.